PharmaVentures, experts in deals and alliances.
Welcome to PharmaVentures Insights at the 2018 Biotech and Money World Congress. China is a huge market, and for Western companies looking to raise money from outside of Europe, US, out of the Western world, China could be an appealing market with a growing number of VCs and also a growing amount of capital for innovation. And this can be seen by PharmaVentures' deal with Tuspark and Bioceptor announced just last year. And today we have on the show Simon Haworth from the Sino-UK Fund, who's doing a similar thing by linking Chinese investors with UK innovators. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you.
So we actually had a conversation in November 2016 where you introduced what you're doing with the Sino-UK Fund,
Yep.
and you used an interesting analogy, the bridge analogy. Why don't you recap us on the bridge analogy?
Yeah, so it's interesting to think back to where we were then, and I think at the time I talked to you about the concept of this wonderful bridge that actually has been built by the two governments. And it's a 7-lane motorway going in both directions, not just one direction. There's no gates now on either side. And back in 2016, that bridge was built. I'm pleased to say that there are now some vehicles on the bridge.
Great.
In 2016, I think we said there were 3 cars and a bicycle on a 7-lane motorway. But there are now some deals. You guys have been involved in one of those, and there's a few others like Kymab where there's capital coming from China. But at the same time, that same interview we had last time, I spoke to 21 chief executives at that meeting, and all of them had products relevant to China. None of them was predicting a single dollar, either in equity investment or trade revenue from China, and every single one said they didn't know how to access China. So that was kind of the context of that last discussion. Where are we now? Well, we have companies now. We have companies which are gaining significant amount of capital from China. Some earlier stage, so some more research focused companies, back to the Kymab example. So historically, China has always wanted products that were 3 years from revenue, really late stage stuff, which in a biotech environment is a tough place to be. Medtech, it's possible. But now we've got some real investors. We've now got some company investors in China, a government intent, so you can get some government support in China for some earlier stage activities. And if you look now at the 5-year plan, development of targeted medicines, however you like to describe that, for example, is really high on their agenda. And the investors are following suit. So at this occasion, you've now got the capacity to actually take a UK or a European technology and take it into the China market.
You've mentioned the stage of the business, so Chinese prefer the later stage companies, and also within areas, this is from our experience,
Yep.
where there's a huge unmet need in Chinese patient populations.
Yep.
If there's any other criteria that may be appealing to the Chinese,
There's a few,
what would they be?
The criteria that appeal to the Chinese, to some extent, I mean, it's a gross generalization, but to some extent, you have to think about the problem from where they're sitting. So, for example, they will take a proxy for skill, and a very good proxy for skill will be someone with the title of professor. So if you take a professor with you, for them that's a concept that, okay, we've started to get a level of technical knowledge, and it's true to say that a professor has an extraordinarily high and useful profile if you're in China. But there are segments of the market. There is no point trying to address a market that the Chinese government isn't supporting. On the other hand, if you're working in an area, so we have, for example, some work in TB, and in TB there is a massive amount of activity in China, and if we're talking to people in China, they in a way have to talk to us because it's on the 5-year plan. So there are themes that matter, there are branding things that matter, whether it's to take a professor or it's to come from Cambridge or Oxford or some other brilliant brand. And the stage of development of your product still matters to a degree. You know, if you've got CE marking, you've got revenue generated. Ideally, if you've got 2 million EBITDA or more, then you're a dead cert. That certainly makes a difference. And at a technical level, just about every therapy that we take over there that gets great excitement has the word antibody in it somewhere. And at the same time, I'm looking at some really interesting developments coming back from China to the UK. So if you take the traditional Chinese medicine market, there's an extraordinary set of technologies there with 2,000 years of tox data that will produce the next small molecule drugs to come through. And I think we're going to get a kickback now from the larger molecule activities that we're all familiar with to actually a new stream of new drugs, small molecule stuff out of TCM, which will be really interesting.
I think that is a really interesting point, and traditionally, this is again a generalization, but big pharma, when you're talking to them about licensing technologies, when a molecule or a new entity, new chemical entity is from a botanical extract or a traditional Chinese medicine, I feel like they already have a, oh, this is not so much for us, reaction. What's your view on that?
I think we're going to have to develop a better way of working out the active ingredient of TCM products, or to understand the complementarity between the entities, elements of that. With a plant extract, you know, you've got variability of production and other variabilities. We don't like variability in pharma products. So yes, of course, there are some difficulties, but how big are the difficulties at developing a new drug in the UK now? Perhaps we're beginning to realise that 2,000 years of tox data isn't a bad place to start. And so I think we're going to have to develop new ways of analysing these multi-factor technologies from China, TCM, and turning those into a form of drug that we can regulate and deliver.
So it'll be a balancing act between the 2,000 years of tox data, using that, but also creating some kind of consistency in the manufacturing, in the development, et cetera.
And we're going to have to work out a process to do that, not just continue to do what we've done. We're going to have to change the way we look at that and find a way to disentangle those different parts from a UK and a European side. And that will be a stream of new technologies, new devices, new drugs.
Do you have any enlightenment or any companies that you know of that are doing this currently?
There are a few who are trying to look at this, but we haven't yet got a new paradigm of how to look at it. So I think that's what we're going to get. And it'll take 3, 4, 5 years before we understand that step. So that's an interesting piece for me right now. We've been taking, you know, large molecule drugs and medical devices to China, and what are we going to bring back? And so I think we need to find a way to load up the lorries with TCM in a way that we can understand and apply in our market.
If there are companies within the UK that either want to go to China or they want to work with Chinese companies that are coming to the UK via you, what can they do?
Okay, so first of all, they have to start. And, you know, we've just set up a special interest group with the government here, with CBBC, with the BIA, and it's taken me probably 3 years to get that special interest group based on healthcare China to get started. So we're getting the stage where companies are beginning to take action. A lot of people are listening and talking about it, but they need to take action. And the hardest part of China is it is a relationship-based market, so you have to be face-to-face. You have to be there. You have to arrange for your Chinese partners to come to the UK or to Europe. You have to go to China. So the first thing they have to do is set enough time aside to be able to engage relationships with China. And from the special interest group's point of view, investment is our first theme. So we're going to be channeling sources of investment for UK and European companies, because my task there is to increase the number of companies that have achieved revenue and equity investment from China. But the other side that you ask is the interesting one, which is how do we engage with Chinese companies coming here? And there is a difference of prejudice between both sides, understanding each other. And the Chinese companies coming here, Fosun have been over many times and have sometimes been disappointed by the amount of government support, for example, that is not in the same form and format that they're used to. So we have to develop the relationships here. We have to handhold Chinese parties in a slow process of assessing this market. And we have to find ways of giving a soft landing to them, because this is an unknown market to them, just as China is an unknown market to us. So it's a two-way street, and we have to be as patient with the Chinese incoming as they have to be with us.
Great. Simon, you've made great progress since we last talked in 2016, and it looks like you're quite active in the area, so we really look forward to looking at what comes out of the Sino-UK Fund in the future.
Well, we've spent a lot of time in China. I probably visit 6 times a year now. In 2014, I think I was 10 trips to China. This year, we've been incredibly fortunate to get a number of awards at a very high level in China. So I met up with Premier Li in December to receive an award in China. Now, in the UK, that is fun, nice. But in China, it's really important, and it gives us access to a vast number of people and capital and market. And my task is to share that. I need to share that with as many people as possible. I need more vehicles on my bridge. So my interest to you guys is to say, look, if there's people who are interested in China who want to take it further, I want to speak to them.
I'm sure a lot of companies will be interested.
I should hope so too.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, Simon.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much.
For more information about PharmaVentures, visit our website